I've often remarked on the fortunate circumstance that New York plays host to so many distinguished visitors from all over the world. Particularly is this true with regard to artists of all sorts, and writers especially, since it is not too much to say, as we do each week on this program, that New York is the book publishing capital, at least of this country. The appearance of many foreign authors on this program has given me much gratification, but I think never so much as on this occasion when my guest is the leader of Japan's post-war generation of novelists, Yukio Mishima. He is here for the publication of his fourth novel to be published in America, but his 13th, I understand, in Japan. It bears the intriguing and beautifully right title, The Sailor Who Fell from Grace with the Sea. Now let me tell you something more about Mr. Mishima before you meet him. He is perhaps even more of a playwright than novelist, since he has written 33 plays, I read, some of which have been performed outside his own country. He has written 74 short stories, which sounds like a career in itself to me, plus a travel book and many articles, two in English for Life and for Holiday. His publishers assure me that he is by far the most popular novelist in his country. His current novel is assuredly going to make him well known and widely read here as well, if he is not already. I had better characterize the novel for you listeners so you can follow on our discussion. It is concerned with a conflict between generations, a theme evidently as powerful and true in Japan as it is here. A band of teenage boys, of whom one, Noboru, is the protagonist of the story, have arrogantly set themselves up as judges of the adult world. Now what seems to an adult reader, their play acting, turns deeply, tragically serious when Noboru's mother, a widow, has an affair with a sailor, an officer on a freighter, which is to eventuate in marriage. But the sailor does not live up to his reputation for toughness with these boys, and they must react with violence. It is a taut, grim tale, but there is relief for the reader through its being told in what might be called the middle distance, at some remove, and with great skill and artistry. Mr. Mishima has a quiet command of his story at all times, which enhances its power. It is a pleasure, as one reads, to watch him keep the elements of this classically constructed novel under perfect control to secure the maximum of effect. Well, now let me bring Mr. Mishima on for some talk on this book particularly, but his work in general, and whatever else we are led into. I need not tell you, but I want to, Mr. Mishima, that you're very heartily welcome in this country, but this is not the first time you've been here, I suppose.
This is a sixth time visit here.
Right.
And the first time I came here, it was 1952, and you had still the elevated train on the Third Avenue in New York.
Yes.
Quite old days.
Mm-hmm. You came then, I suppose, as you were coming now in connection with the publication of a book of yours here?
That's right.
Your first book in America?
Yes.
Yes. Now, I know that there are many bonds between your country and mine. I'd like to talk about those for just a little bit at any rate. Some of them are commercial, of course, which makes it possible that our getting such things as your precision instruments, such as cameras and TV sets. But at the very apex of all exports and imports are works of art to and from any two countries, of course. There probably never can be too much of that kind of commerce. I wonder if, from your point of view, this cultural exchange and other types of cultural exchange are well managed. Are they as high in priority as they ought to be or could be, do you think?
Well, I think such a sort of cultural exchange between your country and my country is particularly important because it is last point of the chain all through the world, and everything come to West through United States to Japan, and everything Oriental come to your country through Japan, you know.
Yes.
And through the Pacific Ocean, we can meet each other. It's a sort of very last point of the worldwide chain, you know.
Well, the Pacific Ocean has become almost a pond in these days of jet air
Yes.
travel, of course, so that it is possible to have this cultural exchange, and we ought to be extending it a great deal, therefore. I wonder if you could tell me what American books get translated into Japanese and so can be in a very large measure appreciated. What American writers are popular with Japanese readers, could you say?
Undoubtedly, Hemingway is most popular, and he was well-read and well-accepted and have a big popularity among even younger generations. But nowadays, Norman Mailer became very popular, and he's quite idealized, and he's considered a sort of hero among younger readers.
Ah, yes.
And of course, many of your literature are widely read, very many are translated, and Faulkner is, of course, very admired and respected. And anyway, 10 times or 20 times more your novels are read in Japan than our novels are read in your country.
I hope we can do something to fix that up.
I hope so.
I wonder who among our writers come to see you, as you have come very happily to see us.
Once I met Mr. Tennessee Williams in Tokyo, and his play has also big popularity in Japan. His Streetcar Named Desire had a big success, and great glass manager also. And sometimes I meet American writers in Tokyo, strangely, and here I have no opportunity to see them.
Americans concerned with such matters as these, as we've just been discussing, are often concerned that we have probably sent you, however, other products of America, and perhaps our cheapest products, in nearly all senses of that word. And that, as a result, America may have had the vulgarizing effect upon the quality of Japanese culture. I wish you'd comment briefly on that, though I know I've opened up a very large bag here in asking such a question. We could talk about that for a long, long time.
Yes, before the war, our employee expense was so low and the laborer expense was so low, and we produced a very cheap product and exported to all over the world. And Japanese product had a very bad reputation. It's cheap, but very bad. But after the war, our industry has been remarkably developed, and we are now exporting many radios or television or many watches and cameras, of course. And I think such a sort of industrial product is becoming to have good reputation here, and no foreign customers consider it a cheap and a bad product. But something like souvenir shop products, like a paper lantern or paper umbrella, something like that, it's so sort of welcomed in some sense of vulgarity.
Yeah. Because you didn't have a great deal of foreign exchange in the years that you've just been referring to, you may have had to buy our cheapest products in order to have any exchange at all, and that may be one of the reasons why the effect has not been as good as we certainly in this country would have you know about America. Well, Mr. Mishima, thank you for what you've been saying, but by common agreement, we're here to talk about your just published novel. At least just right here, at any rate, that's true, and just out, just published a few days ago. It is undoubtedly not the last publication of yours in Japan. When was it published there?
It was published a couple of years ago, and translated. It takes very long time to translate from Japanese into English. Very few translators who can read Japanese and who can write good English style. And very fortunately, John Nason, my translator, did very good job, but still took a time a little bit, 1 hour and a half to.
Yes.
Anyway,
I'm sure it would take a long time indeed.
That's right.
For many
very
reasons.
difficult.
I felt that it was a very good job, although I have no knowledge whatsoever of Japanese, and thus can't really give an authoritative opinion. But it's a beautifully stylized piece of English writing, even if
it is very important.
Yes. Has he been Has he been faithful to your style, would you say, in any degree at all?
I think so, and we had a several times discussion about translation, and he gave me 1,000 questions about details of the novel. And so we so tightly cooperated that it maybe it gave a good effect to the translation.
Well, it's a fine thing for, it seems to me, the translator to be able to talk with the author. That would help very greatly indeed. This doesn't happen too often, I'm sure.
No.
Of course,
you mean from French literature to English or something?
If the translator can talk with the author who's written it in the original language and ask questions, as Mr. Nathan did of you,
yes,
that's a superb thing to be able to do. Of course, he's lucky in having someone like yourself who knows English very well. Now, I noticed in the copyright page that the Japanese title of this novel, when it was published in Japan, had 3 words in it, and the American title has 9. I wonder if you'd tell me what that Japanese title meant in English.
In English, it means the afternoon's tow, T-O-W. You know, the poor ship by tugboat called tow.
Tow, yes.
But the editor considered it's not a good English title, and they wanted to give a completely new title on it. And the translator and myself discussed about this problem and gave finally this long title. But it sounds poetical. It's all right.
I think it's a singularly poetic title. And hence it's intriguing and stirring to one's curiosity. And so I think it leads to reading and to book buying. It's a good thing. I have to say, therefore, it's a very good title. And I wanted very much to ask you how you felt about it. Was the original title, did you consider it to be a good title in Japanese?
Yes, it's quite a good title in Japanese. Because in Japanese word, the tow has also another meaning, which means glory. And the in Japanese, it is called eiko, Japanese word eiko.
Yes.
It sounds sometimes a glory, on the other hand, you see.
Yes.
And so, which symbolizes the story itself.
So there's a play on words there in Japanese that we miss.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, now our listeners are very much more interested in what's in the book, and we'd better get on to that right away. Of course, I've already described the book in what I've said, and something about its story. We here would interpret the story as a study of youth in some measure of revolt against their elders. Now, these youngsters, among whom is Noboru, one of your chief characters, are certainly passing judgments on adults and acting with horrible precision against them. But different people find different emphases in novels, and I would like to ask if this is what the Japanese readers find in this book, a revolt against the age.
I think most of Japanese reader would think it is fantastic novel, and they wouldn't think it is the story based on the actual accident which happened actually. But on the other hand, they I'm sure they would feel or they would fear about such a problem, which is becoming very serious even in Japan. And we always feel something unfamiliar, something strange to teenager boy psychology. And in the good old days, we always felt about the younger generation, they're feeling just like we felt at their age. But nowadays, we never be able to have such a feeling to teenagers. I think it's the same phenomenon all over the world. And I wanted to appeal such a sort of fear of readers. Readers could be, at least older than 25 or something like that.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Well, I had a feeling that just what you've been saying, talking about, that there is a sort of revolt among the world's youth, probably, and that Japan was sharing in it, as we certainly are feeling it here. But it isn't so clear, at least to us, against what they are revolting. Is it authority?
That's a problem. And it is not exactly the authority. Authority or established quality or value is already destroyed. And even in Japan, excuse me, in Japan, particularly after the war, such a sort of old settled value was completely destroyed, and younger people feels there is no settled morality or settled value exists anymore. But still they want to have revolt to something older or something older than themselves, and they have no purpose and no concept about what they want to revolt. And it is a very strange thing, and I wanted to write about such a boy's psychology, such a sort of something incomprehensible. And I made analysis and research about such a psychology. And I don't give any conclusion in it, just to suggest.
Yes, true. You bring up a point there that I want to talk about just a bit with you. See, from what I've gathered, your youth of college age is certainly far more politically conscious than ours, and they take a larger role in political activity. If something happens in the country that they don't like, they get out and demonstrate in a very big way, and that doesn't happen very often in this country. So this brings me, I say, to a particular point about your characters. They're much younger than we would expect here. See, Noboru is 13, I think it is. The leader of the group may be a little bit older, but not very much, I suspect. But this activity is surprising to us because teenage kids of 13 just wouldn't, I think, do all the things that your children do. And this may make some readers in this country perhaps doubt the essential truth of the book. And I wanted to bring that up, quite frankly, and ask you what you thought about that. Have you some explanation for your children of 13 doing this kind of thing?
In our country, boys is matured very quickly. It's a very recent phenomenon, and maybe it is very new. We became to have nourishing food. It must be one physical reason, might be, and they are matured very quickly anyway. And we have some example. A 10-year-old boy committed suicide sometimes, and maybe by some very philosophical, metaphysical reasons. And I think a 13-year-old boy just enough to think about the world by the poor knowledge, but very strong opinion, you see.
Well, that's very interesting indeed. And of course, it does mark one difference between your youth and ours, I'm sure. There's perhaps another, explanation maybe. I wonder if it isn't true that adults just don't know what any teenager is thinking about.
It is not understood by adults, and it's not incomprehensible at all.
Now, this protest of this group of youngsters, teenagers, in your book, is very deep going. It seems to me, thorough. Though there's no disapproval of the affair between Noboru's mother. What was her name?
Sako.
Sako, yes. I might add that she was a widow, and the sailor from the sea, Ryuji. Now, the young can often be very conservative, too, and one would have expected, I think, that they would disapprove of that relationship, but they don't. These members of the group accept it without any question at all. What is their charge against the sailor, really?
It is not a realistic approach in my novel, and I wanted to symbolize as irony of Romanticism, and the sailor has quite old-fashioned romanticism in their mind.
Yes.
It's just like old samurai's romanticism, which was still preserved in Japanese mind. And the boys represent another new romanticism. It is existentialistic romanticism. And both of them are different kind of romanticism. It is sort of conflict between two types of romanticism, you know. And sailor's romanticism should be destroyed by newcomers. And boys maybe might have same kind of romanticism as sailors in their 30s, in their 40s.
Yes. That's very good and very subtly put, I must say. Now, the incident of the killing of the kitten is pretty horrifying to read, but it is nevertheless a beautiful way, an effective way, to establish the lengths to which these boys are going to go. Actually, it forecasts what's going to happen to the sailor, doesn't it? It's pretty grim, but it's right in the structure of the novel. But you reduce the horror, make it less horrible, but make it by making it seem somewhat remote by the style in which you write. Now, is this style put on or used for this particular book, or is it your style in general?
I always consider one novel should have its own style, but of course the author couldn't have so many various styles.
No.
But I will try to give what is the right style for this novel, and the sailor novel should have its own style, and so I wanted to give such a sort of compact, concrete style, a sort of classical style to this novel, which might give some effect in the contrast to the horrible story, and which might make the story itself in quite a classical tragedy type of story.
And this does mark some departure from your other books, generally speaking.
Yes.
Yes. I must admit to not having read any of your other books, and I shall soon make up that omission on my part. I particularly like to read The Sound of Waves. That has been made into a movie, was it not?
Yes, twice in Japan.
Oh, twice. Well, now, it's this control that I speak of which makes this novel, I think, The Sailor Who Fell from Grace with the Sea, so effective and so artistic in its handling. I think this is a remarkable novel in the control and what we might say coolness that it has.
Yes.
You could have been much more emotional about it, you see, and melodramatic, but you kept that under control, and I want to congratulate you upon that effect in this
Thank
book.
you very much. I'm pleased to hear that, because such a passionate and emotional aspect is represented by the character in it, the sailor and the widow.
Yes.
And they represent such a emotional part of the novel. And consequently, a writer should write in some objective way, you know.
Yeah. Well, Mr. Mishima, my warm thanks to you for coming to the Almanac and talking of your novel so interestingly. And I want to say again, it is particularly good to have you in this country.